Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills, lived two unlikely friends, Whiskers the cat and Nibbles the rat. Their friendship was one of the village's best-kept secrets. You see, in the natural order of things, cats and rats weren't supposed to be friends. Cats chased rats, and rats scurried away. But Whiskers and Nibbles were different. They had known each other since they were very young, having grown up in the same barn, and somehow they became the best of friends. Whiskers was a sleek, silver-furred cat with bright green eyes. He was proud, fast, and loved to nap in the warm sun. Nibbles, on the other hand, was small, quick, and always busy looking for his next meal. His brown fur and sharp little nose made him look like the typical village rat, but there was something special about him. He was cleverer than most, and he had a knack for finding solutions to the toughest problems. One day, when they were both just kittens and pups, Whiskers had stumbled upon a trap set by the farmer. The cat was hungry, and the smell of fresh cheese was irresistible. As soon as he approached the trap, though, Nibbles squeaked from behind a stack of hay, "Don't go near that. It's a trap," warned Nibbles. Whiskers, too proud to listen, scoffed, "What does a rat like you know about traps? I'm a cat, remember? I'm smart enough to handle myself." But no sooner had he stepped toward the trap than it snapped shut, trapping his tail beneath the metal bar. Whiskers yowled in pain. Despite their differences, Nibbles rushed over and gnawed at the rope holding the trap in place. After a few minutes of intense work, the trap loosened and Whiskers was free. He looked at Nibbles, surprised by the rat's bravery. "Thank you," Whiskers murmured, embarrassed but genuinely grateful. "I was wrong." From that day on, an unspoken bond formed between them. They kept each other company, playing in the fields and sharing stories of their adventures. Whiskers often boasted about his hunting skills, while Nibbles bragged about his ability to sneak into the farmer's pantry undetected. But as much as they loved each other, their friendship was far from perfect. They bickered constantly. If Whiskers wanted to nap in the sun, Nibbles wanted to run around and play. If Nibbles found a stash of food, Whiskers would demand the biggest portion, arguing that he was larger and needed more. Their arguments sometimes became so loud that the farmer's dog, Rex, would come over to see what was happening. One particularly hot summer afternoon, they had one of their biggest fights. It all started when Nibbles found a hidden cache of grain in the barn. "Whiskers, look what I found," Nibbles called, his little tail twitching with excitement. Whiskers yawned, stretched, and sauntered over. "Great find, Nibbles. I'll take my share now," he said, licking his lips. "Your share?" Nibbles asked, incredulous. "I found it. You should get what I decide to give you." Whiskers narrowed his eyes. "I'm bigger, so I need more food." "It's only fair." Nibbles, who was tired of always giving in, puffed out his chest. "No, it's not fair. Just because you're bigger doesn't mean you should get everything. I did all the work finding this food." They began to argue, their voices growing louder and louder until they were practically shouting at each other. Finally, Nibbles, in a fit of frustration, said something he regretted immediately: "Maybe we shouldn't be friends at all." The words hung in the air like a thick cloud. Whiskers' ears flattened and his tail swished angrily. Without another word, he turned and stalked off, leaving Nibbles alone with the pile of grain. For the first time in their friendship, it seemed like they might never speak to each other again. Days passed. Whiskers spent his time alone, wandering the village and sulking in the sun. Nibbles, too proud to apologize, busied himself with gathering food and trying to forget the fight. But deep down, both of them missed each other terribly. Their adventures felt dull, and the food, no matter how delicious, didn't taste as good without a friend to share it with. Then, one evening, a terrible storm rolled into the village. The wind howled, the rain poured down in sheets, and the barn where Nibbles lived began to flood. The little rat scurried to higher ground, but the water rose quickly. Soon, he was trapped on a small stack of hay, surrounded by rising water. He squeaked in fear, knowing that if the water got any higher, he wouldn't survive. Whiskers, who had taken shelter in the farmer's house, heard Nibbles' frightened squeaks from across the yard. Without a second thought, he dashed out into the storm, his fur soaked instantly. He sprinted to the barn and leaped inside, his sharp eyes searching for his friend. "Nibbles," he called, "Whiskers, over here." came the terrified reply. Whiskers spotted Nibbles, stranded on the hay, and without hesitation, he waded through the rising water. Reaching his friend, he crouched low. "Climb on my back," he shouted over the roar of the storm. Nibbles didn't argue. He scrambled onto Whiskers' back, clinging to his wet fur. With a powerful leap, Whiskers jumped to safety, carrying Nibbles with him. They hurried out of the barn, making their way to the farmer's house where they found shelter from the storm. As they sat in the warm kitchen, drying off by the fire, Nibbles looked up at Whiskers. "Thank you for saving me," he said quietly. Whiskers purred softly, licking his paw. "We may fight sometimes, Nibbles, but you're my friend. I'll always be there for you." Nibbles smiled. "And I'll always be there for you too, Whiskers. Even when you're being a bossy cat." They both laughed, the tension from their earlier fight melting away. They realized that despite their differences, their friendship was stronger than any argument. From that day on, they still had their little disagreements. Whiskers was still a bit bossy, and Nibbles was still a bit stubborn, but they never let those fights come between them. The village remained unaware of the unusual friendship between the cat and the rat. But Whiskers and Nibbles didn't care. They had each other, and that was enough. And so, they continued their adventures together, arguing, laughing, and always standing by each other's side, proving that true friendship could exist even in the most unlikely of pairs.